Welcome back to Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am delighted once again to be joined by Quinny. You may know Quinny from his other endeavours. Celts are here. And your own thing. Quinny, tell us all about that as we move towards an hour of Celtic chat. Where can we find you? What have you been up to?
It's been kind of busy on a lot of fronts for the last couple of weeks. I was very thankful to yourselves, obviously sorting me out. Got to see John Collins live in person the other night, which was great, and a wee bit of a connection. I managed to get to the Ross County game at the weekend. So, just want to start off by saying thanks very much, mate. It's been a bit of a mad week in all directions, but certainly Celtic wise, it's been all hands on deck for the last few days. I had the B team game last week as well, so it's just been kind of whirlwind stuff for the last week. Never mind all the stuff in the background.
Yeah, it's great. There is always. I remember 4 years ago now, deciding that we were going to do this mad thing called a live stream, which obviously is old hat now. And talking to a lot of people saying, "Oh, we'll do it every day for an hour," and people are saying, "No chance. You can't talk about Celtic for an hour every day." And here we are. All this time later, we'll probably extend it from an hour as we move forward. But quite a lot to pick up on, obviously, over the last week or so, as always. And we've got the big game tomorrow. And I knew, obviously, Aberdeen were doing well, but I was just having a wee look at the record this season, Quinny. They've not lost a single. In fact, they've not even drawn a single game at Pittodrie this season. So correct me if I'm wrong, anybody in the comments. That's what I was looking at this morning. And I'm thinking to myself, bit of an old school vibe if you're my age. I know you're a bit younger. A bit of an old school vibe about going to Pittodrie, under the lights, having to get the win. I'm thinking right back to even the centenary year where we went up there and we got some really good results up at Pittodrie. And there is that vibe, even though we hammered them at Hampden. I do get the feeling, Quinny, it's going to be different this week because of their excellent home record, 100% home record.
Yeah, I didn't know that one myself. It's a very good stat. 7 wins in 7 games, 17 goals scored, only 6 conceded. Goalkeepers out, but I believe for this one, so maybe it's a wee bit of a changer on the form. But I remember Aberdeen being a feisty away game, really, for my whole time being a Celtic supporter. I was just thinking there, as you were saying, like even before the McInnes days, even back when, what was there, a guy that was pure orange? Was it Jimmy Nicholson? What was his name again? The old
Jimmy
Dunfermline manager?
Calderwood. Jimmy Calderwood.
I
Yeah.
beg your pardon.
Loved their sunbed.
Aye, Aberdeen have always kind of been, obviously there's a wee bit more venom between them and the Bluebeaks, but they always give us a game, certainly, and certainly up at their place it's expected to be a relative sellout, I suppose, so like it should be a really good atmosphere in terms of just the game itself. But that, as we know, midweek under the floodlights, if you're at home, like you can get a good bit of belief into the crowd quite easily, pre-match certainly. So definitely won't be an easy game.
The big thing for me as well, even in the kind of more recent history, Brendan Rodgers versus Aberdeen, first time round, that was the kind of battle of the top two in the World Cup finals, etc., competed between the two clubs. So I think this season's been an interesting one because at home, I would have expected us to be far more comfortable than we were against them. And I get the argument, Quinny, around the fact that we probably switched off maybe for 20 minutes in that game. Aberdeen took full advantage of it. And then we did dominate them for the rest of the match, but we couldn't get that killer winner. And then at Hampden, we just we destroyed them. We were at our imperious best. And I do think tomorrow night it's great to be going up there. I was someone shared a clip with me in relation to how tedious Scottish football is when Celtic win all the time, and I can't remember it being tedious for the rest of Scottish football when the shoe was on the other foot. And obviously, I had to go through that, like many people in the comments, when a certain other team were winning every league title for 9 seasons, spending money that didn't add up even back then. You couldn't understand why they had such a depth to their squad and they were buying these guys from all over the world. But that's what happened. And we know what the aftermath was. But it's interesting how the narrative changes when Celtic are the force. And Celtic have done it, Quinny, in such a way. You could map this right back, obviously, to the takeover. And we spoke a wee bit about that on Sunday night. But it's just been a year-on-year improvement, not only on the park, but as a business. So whatever we have, whatever money we spend, it's earned. So every success that we get is earned. And it seems as though it's difficult for some people to give you credit. That they'll bemoan the quality of the Scottish game before they'll say, Celtic have done really well,
Absolutely. And I think like it's something that's so overlooked right now because us as Celtic fans, also we've lived it. You know, we know that, and again, John Collins is a great kind of example of this. But we've been martyrs as Celtic fans for the last like 15 years with the lack of investment, the lack of money being spent, and all the rest of it. Especially when they went down the divisions, it really did feel that. I heard on our Celtic channel, it might have been on here, but I heard somebody saying recently it was a controlled decline, which I thought was a fantastic kind of phrase where we did deliberately, not spend as much, hire guys like Dyla and all the rest of it for, fractions of the cost of maybe somebody like the Rodgerses that we were on to and stuff like that. And it's kind of part of the thing I've always given Peter Lawwell a little bit of license with because like the, being so frugal for that whole like 10, 15 years, whatever it was, now gives you that real springboard where all of a sudden all this Champions League money that's now flooded in and good transfer business, you can instantly like reap the rewards of it. It's not that that's now putting you like, oh, finally we've sold a player for 15 million quid or something. We can now, and then they turn around and go, oh, well, actually we need to do the training centre. Oh no, well, actually we need to do Lennox Town, or actually we need to do this. All that kind of, I say that kind of penance has been kind of served already in advance. And now, like you say, there's not enough credit for the diligence that the club's really put into place over the last couple of years to now when the good stuff comes, it's like instantly you can just take advantage of it.
You are right, and it is diligent, but as football fans, I remember being up at the park actually. Well, this is the thing, right? Because you want everything, don't you? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? We're football fans, Quinny, and it's like, are we unrealistic sometimes with our expectations? Sometimes we are. But there is a balance to be struck. And I know that I have gone on quite a bit about John Collins on Sunday, but there was so much to take from that couple of hours on the stage. And one of the things, the downsizing, like you say, the club were accused of that at the time. They've been accused of it since. But when you hear it from the horse's mouth, when John was saying, we needed a certain player in a certain position. So we're talking what resulted in us signing Colin, Kazim, Richards and Carlton Cole, right? So he tells you the whole story, but he breaks it down and he takes the time to say, right, so we needed, let's say, a striker, and we do have everybody working on the he mentioned, I think he name-checked Y-Scout, and he's like, right, so this is your first, second, third and fourth choice of player. So they were going for the first choice and then working down if we couldn't get a deal done, because someone asked, what position on the table was Carlton Cole and Colin Kazim Richards? And he actually did say they weren't really their targets. They absolutely were not their targets, and they were offered to them, and they bumped them back, but we ended up signing them anyway. So listen, we're not having this discussion if one of them comes in and is an absolutely exceptional talent, and I'm pretty sure that's happened as well in the past, right? But when you're looking at that, you're thinking, wow, we did do it on the cheap for a few of the years that we won the 9. And I think that the legacy of that isn't so far as looking at the first team and the recruitment and the signings. It's really more the youth development. I felt that we had a great opportunity within that decade, if you like, to bring in far more youth players. We've not done it. And it's almost as if we're lagging behind now, Quinny. And a lot of the comments that Brendan's making in the press conferences are almost to that kind of tune where he's saying they're not good enough. The guys I'm being presented with are not good enough. And for me, that's kind of like a legacy of becoming a wee bit lazy and lackluster with that approach back in the day, because it is cycles. We should have cycles of players coming through, and we've not got that. And that's the biggest frustration for me. I think somebody like Ange or Brendan can work their magic when it comes to recruitment. And I think that Paul Tisdale coming in shows that it's more of a longer term plan, even maybe exceeding the time that Brendan's at the football club, where that recruitment system is better than it was last summer. But my biggest disappointment's the lack of youth coming through, Quinny. And again, John Collins spoke about that as well, didn't he?
Yeah. I think like that's kind of what we were chatting about in a roundabout way just before kind of coming on, in terms of like Scottish football, the kind of development and coaching and all the rest of it. And it's one of these things where I think that I actually know, not terribly well, but I've met them at coaching courses and stuff like that. But I know there's a fair few coaches at Celtic now that have, like, in the different age brackets, that have been there for like a number of years. And I think like technology, facilities, supply, resources, these things are all really important, which the club's made like great strides in. We've not really had the opportunity to see any of that really being used yet. I think a lot of it's still under construction or whatever. But a really important part of youth development for me is like that kind of coherent message all the way through the club. And when it comes to like coaching and having like guys that can actually move players through the age groups and all the rest of it, like there's been a lot of change in coaching over the last like 15 years, 20 years, whatever it might be. And, you know, like I think that there's a lot that's probably been done behind the scenes that we're not probably really going to get much yield from until a little bit further down the road, you know, because like we're seeing a wee bit of a resurgence now with Scottish young players. A bunch of them are moving to Italy. Some of them are now showing up in bigger leagues and getting, you know, even in our top flight division, significant minutes at a young age, which is nice. And yeah, it feels like we've got some stuff that might be going on, but it's kind of similar to them, I suppose, because I did feel that when they went all the way back to the bottom, like that should have just been plan A, B, and C for them. It was just like young Scottish footballers, bring them all in and, you know, build a team sort of thing. And obviously they couldn't have made a bigger mess of it if they tried ultimately. But it's hard, you know, if you've not got everything lined up. Like if you've got good coaches, but you've not really got, you know, in relative terms to, like, for me, like the Hepburns and the Dokes and all these guys that leave, a lot of the things they're doing or they're gaining by leaving isn't all, like the money's obviously the obvious part, but they're like going to laboratories. A lot of these top, you know, clubs, their facilities are like NASA level, you know, in terms of knowing their oxygen intake and the body fats and, you know, all the stuff that really goes into it. And, you know, like if you might be great on the training ground and all that, but if you're not able to actually build the athletes the same way as Liverpool, Bayern, take your pick, then you're not going to produce players that can play against them, really, you know. So there's so many things involved in it, attitudes and institutional kind of issues or whatever also run alongside that, I think. But I think like there's a good coaching staff there. I don't know it intimately well, but I certainly know faces and some names and stuff like that of guys that have been there for a fair length of time. And then with the facilities coming through and the progress I've seen in the B team over the last 3 seasons, I only watch the Champions League stuff because that's all I'm kind of like invited to kind of work at, if you get me. You know, I think there's a lot of room for encouragement, but you're right. Like when you are like doing it like on the cheap transfer wise, you would have expected to see much more come through, but I just don't think we've really had the raw resources.
You know, when I was looking the other week there at Hibs, for example, right, and someone picked me up wrong. I don't want to see Hearts doing well. That's I had this conversation the other day about how we should have strong sides coming out of the capital, Hibs and Hearts, and we should have a strong Aberdeen. This should be no surprise to us. We should also have a strong Dundee United side, I believe. That doesn't mean to say I want to see Hearts doing well. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've no love for the Heart of Midlothian Football Club, but these teams should all be doing a lot better than they are. And I used Hibs as an example last week because they have signed 50 players in 5 seasons. And they've had 5 managers in the 5 seasons. That's a basket case of a situation. That's never going to work. And I asked, sorry to name drop him again, but I asked John Collins if Hibs had put all their resources and investment into the youth development at Easter Road, would they have done any worse? Would they be sitting any lower than second bottom of the league? And he said no, they wouldn't have been. But it's this instant gratification, and we're bad for it as fans. Of course we are. The demands are there, etc. But the boards pull the trigger on the manager. A new manager comes in, a swathe of new players come in every transfer window, and before you know it, there's no identity left. There is no heartbeat of the football club. There's no nucleus of a team, and we have got that. We've got that nucleus of the team, and that's why I continually go on about Tony Ralston being an important cog in the wheel. He knows the fabric of the football club. I think Celtic, I don't know about other modern clubs, but I think Celtic, it's really important to have that nucleus, that hardcore, who have maybe been at the club since they were like 8 or 9 year olds, teenagers at least, Quinny. And they come through and they know what the demands are. The era of players who worked with someone like Tommy Burns is dying out. You know, so that the mantra of Tommy, the way that he used to implement and embed the Celtic culture and all the young guys coming through, eventually that'll kind of taper off. And I think we need figures like that at the football club to ensure that the identity of Celtic and what it means to the fans is never, ever lost. And you're always going to get guys. I mean, the other one that I brought up the other day was Lennon Miller. If Lennon Miller is offered a deal in January by Celtic, Quinny, and he's offered a deal by someone in Italy, we'll use Italy because it's in vogue at the moment for Scottish players to go there. I mean, John's example was Monaco and how he benefited by going over there, not just learning a new language and, you know, really being part of the culture, but the habits, the diet, the conditioning, etc. And that was the dilemma. I said, right, if the boy is offered the same deal and one of the options is Celtic, and one of them, let's say, is Napoli, where does he go? And the answer I was given by Collins was wherever he's going to have a better chance of first team football. So he kind of sat in the fence there, Quinny. But as a young guy coming through, 17, 18-year-olds, that is a dilemma that could be faced. Where are you going to benefit? Where are you going to be developing more as a footballer? What do you think? Try and be as honest as you can, because it's hard as a Celtic fan to say, oh, you know what, you probably get more game time if you go to Italy. But a lot of the guys that have gone to play in Italian football have done exceptionally well. Some of them have had secondary moves to bigger clubs, either within Italy or down to England. So that is a massive dilemma. What would you do as a 17 or 18-year-old, or if you were advising somebody where to go?
Minutes is the biggest thing. I was quickly trying to scramble over there because on Celtic here, the other Celtic channel I work with, we were on a podcast this morning and we were talking about McKibben. McKibben has got 209 senior appearances at the age of 26. Now, it's up and down the Scottish pyramid and the ladder and whatever, right? And Hatate in the leagues has 140. I'll try to do quick maths. And including the cups, 26, so 165. Hatate, including, and again, he's had like Champions League seasons with us in all competitions, has less minutes in his, or has less appearances in his career at the same age as someone like Luke McKibben. And even with that, we all know from his Celtic career, Hatate doesn't clock many 90 minutes, as it were. Mm-hmm. So like McKibben's got a lot more a lot more in-ring experience, if you like. He's a bit more battle-hardened, a bit more, and I think that's just a really good example of like footballers get better when they play more football. It's as simple as that. And for Lennon Miller, like, he has to come to Celtic knowing he's going to get minutes. So there's kind of two things at play with that, because like nobody really seems outside of McGregor to be properly nailed on to start at the moment anyway. So as long as there is like regular minutes, because we're lifting the level of the minutes he's getting, there might be a Champions League game or two that might comes into the fold. There'll be cup semi-finals and finals, big derby matches, whatever. So as long as there's clearly going to be like significant minutes and appearances across the competitions that we play in, I think it could work out quite well. But if he's like guaranteed like 100%, like he's going into a team where he'll walk into it, it's maybe slightly down a level, and it's abroad, maybe there's different facilities, different climate and all the rest of it. I could see that tempting, but I don't think like that. It doesn't really seem that this move would be motivated by money, compared to some other ones that we've seen in the past. From all accounts, what his dad's done with him previously is just make sure opportunities and minutes, and that seems to be the focus and the mantra. I likened it before to like Haaland, because like when Haaland left Norway, he could have went anywhere then, but he went to Austria. And then when he left Austria, he could have went anywhere again, but he went to Dortmund because there was like I'm going to do this and I'll do that and I'll learn tricks of the trade along the way, and then I'll get to where I'm going eventually. So I think it's really about the package, and he really needs to believe that he'll get into the team on opportunities available, because he'll believe himself to be able to do it for talent. And I think if you look at the Celtic squad at the moment, there's no reason to believe that there's merit to be there's merit there for like getting 20 games next season for us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm going to ask the views of Ian Conroy, who is going to join us all the way from New Zealand. Here he is. Ian, how are you doing, my friend?
Hi, guys. Sorry I'm late. Proverbial technical issues. I'm here now.
No bother. You're wearing green and white hoops, so all is forgiven. All is forgiven. I don't know if you've managed to share some screen time with Quinny before, but we were just talking there. Obviously,
I've not. How are you doing?
There we go.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's the back three. We'll just play a black three today. Pittodrie tomorrow night, Ian, you think about it in different ways. You think about it back in the day, like as a retro mid-40s guy that I am, and you think about the tough games you got up there. And then there was a period where, it wasn't really a tough fixture, and we would go up there and would hammer them, and that happened for some time. Then there's that period around about Brendan's first tenure at Celtic, where Aberdeen were our closest challengers for a spell there. And then this season, you're thinking, well, they are second in the league. We've got to absolutely respect that. They're unbeaten at home. They've won every home game in all domestic competitions. And we're going up there tomorrow with quite a few options. We're going to be talking about some of the guys that came in and did really well over the weekend. But going up there tomorrow night, it's going to be a full house under the floodlights, Ian. It becomes an exciting fixture again as a Celtic fan.
It does, and I think I touched upon this before in a previous podcast. There was signs of it last season. Obviously the cup game was a was a notable one, where they were going through a bit of a bad time, but they still gave us a hell of a game. We were lucky to go through. Tawdry's always a hard away fixture, especially at night. A nighttime fixture, as is with lots of games. But I think we just have to keep up this relentless pursuit of perfection, almost. Sort of Brendan came out and said that at the weekend. Sort of comparing Ross County result this year compared to last year. He's kind of noting that his pursuit of excellence, is kind of is on track. And we're kind of. So I think it can only happen game by game. So we don't take anything for granted. Obviously, that the rotation that we had at the weekend, it seemed like it was seamless, which is a really good sign. How often do you see that where you sort of change even just 2 or 3? And it's happened to us this season when we had Trust introduced to the back four, and it just and Via as well. It knocked off our equilibrium off a little bit. So I think obviously the players know each other a bit better now. So no matter who the personnel are, I personally think he'll go with his sort of his starting 11, even though he says he hasn't got a set starting 11. I think he'll go with the tried and trusted. But that said, I just came on the back end of you talking about Luke McCowan there. I honestly wouldn't be upset at all if he got a run in the team. I think he's ready. I think he's hungry. I think he's deserving of a chance as well. I think maybe Engels is kind of a little bit up and down at the moment because of his price tag. I think that drives the fact that he's sort of maybe expected to be on the pitch every week. But it wouldn't be a bad thing just to sort of take him out the firing line a little bit and mix and match him and just build him back up again.
You're talking there about Brendan massively and building the player up. There's one thing for sure, Quinny. That is what his forte is, that one-to-one management style where he can take a player under his wing. He spoke about it last week, didn't he? And he was talking about how, Paulo Bernardo had been written off, Nicholas Kuhn had been written off, and now it seems to be Arnie Engels' turn. I do think that a big part of that chat is around the hefty transfer fee, right? What was it? One of the Jambos said 10 million, right? Didn't even get the transfer fee right, all right? And Rodgers was at pains to stress that the boy has got nothing to do with the transfer fee. He's just playing his football, going about his business. He'll have aspirations, and then Celtic come in. My point has been and will be this season that Arnie Engels, to use the transfer fee against them is quite foolish, because as we sit here now, a few months into his Celtic career, you would ask the question, what's he done since he signed for Celtic? Since he was an £11 million player, and I wasn't complaining when we spent £11 million on him. What's he done? Well, he's become a Belgian international, a full international, and he's played Champions League football. But not only that, he's got 3 assists in 5 games, Quinny. So you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, if he was worth £11 million a few months ago, he's worth at least £11 million today. So forget the transfer fee. I would actually say that the bigger issue is that what he was replacing was Matt O'Reilly. And he's a completely different player to Matt O'Reilly. And it even took Matt O'Reilly a while to get into his groove in terms of being that first pick in the team. So the Arnie Engels question, and I don't even know if it's Engels versus McCowan, but let's talk about the midfield for tomorrow night, Quinny, because you've got McCowan coming in, man of the match performance, 3 assists, 1 goal. What a half of football. You've got Bernardo coming in, and he seems to be beyond his years when it comes to maturity. He's a very mature player, isn't he? Very intelligent player. And then, of course, you've got McGregor, who's a stick-on. But you've got Hatate and you've got Engels as well waiting in the wings. So how do you shape that midfield for tomorrow night? I'm going to bring one point up before you answer, Quinny, right? And it is here that someone talks about the physicality of Aberdeen. It's Stephen Donnelly. So in you come, Stephen. I have a feeling we will be kicked off the park tomorrow night. Hopefully the referee protects the players. In the 2 games I've seen Aberdeen playing this season, that has been a feature of their midfield. I'm going to use words like robust and combative. Yesterday I called them dirty. Is that in Rodgers' mind when he's picking the midfield 3?
I guess so, probably. I think he plays the same midfield again as he did at the weekend. I think really dovetailing to what we were just chatting about there with Miller, like you have to kind of think about that with the current squad as well. It's like if they are playing that good, they have to believe that ultimately it will lead them to being in what is the best 11, even though all of them are starters and all the other kind of stuff that Rodgers has thrown at us. And like Bernardo and McKibben were head and shoulders. And again, it was Ross County, right? So it does kind of flavour the conversation a little bit, but they really did show you, like, all three midfielders scored against Ross County. Luke McKibben was the most productive defensive and attacking midfielder in the game in terms of statistics like tackles and duels and passes and all that kind of stuff. And Bernardo just gets it, because he's been here a little bit longer. He played with O'Reilly, he played with McGregor and Hatate, like on full form, full revs. So he's kind of got an advantage over Engels, where Engels is kind of coming in and he's trying to replace somebody, and he's a little bit different in terms of his style. I often say on the videos I'm making, like, it doesn't look like he's in his natural habitat in a lot of the games that we've played him in. I think Atalanta away and one or two other ones where he was like told to be a bit deeper, it just looked natural. And so often we're still pitching him out a bit higher up the pitch. So I wouldn't be surprised if McGowan and Bernardo start again, just to kind of galvanise the squad mentality, and that, like, nobody's a guaranteed starter and everyone can work their way into the team, kind of thing. And I think, like you said, in terms of the combative nature of it, like McKibben and Bernardo are up for that,
Well, yesterday, Kevin Graham wanted Engels in the side. So I've not given my predicted 11. I'll probably do that before the game tomorrow. Celtic fans view, welcome to the show. A day off, so getting to tune in live for a change. Roll on tomorrow night. Unfortunately, I will be in the home end because it's that bad trying to get tickets for away games these days. Again, it's going to be a conversation consistently, Ian, how Scottish football has such a potential because of the fans, right? Because of the Scottish supporting public who actually are football crazy, and we ensure that, in terms of average attendances, we've seen the kind of European table. Scotland are always up there. And the clubs themselves shoot themselves in the foot time and time again. This isn't me being selfish in terms of Celtic, right? And Celtic fans and how we should always get tickets, etc., because I have been accused of that by other fans of other clubs. But I'm just thinking financially. And I think over the last couple of months, we have seen how difficult it is in Scottish football to survive at times. We've got two clubs at the moment within the top four divisions who are currently in administration, having been deducted points because of financial mismanagement. How they're going to come through, if they're going to come through, who knows how that's going to develop. They're talking about police fraud cases and everything. And by the way, Quinny knows a lot more than I do in terms of the Dumbarton one. And I want you to give us a wee update on that, Quinny, because the work you're doing behind the scenes is tremendous. And you've got clubs, with that being the backdrop, the financial backdrop of Scottish football, you've got clubs refusing entry, basically, of thousands and thousands of Celtic fans. And tomorrow night, by the way, maybe not a good example, but tomorrow night I'm going to be looking at that. There'll be not an empty seat in the stadium, but there was loads of empty seats at Tynecastle here, and there's loads of empty seats at Rugby Park when they refused to give us tickets. I don't understand it. I can't get my head around it. It's bad management. It's almost like, cutting your nose off to spite your face here. But it's typical Scottish football, isn't it?
Well, this, I suppose, precedence was set by the Rangers, wasn't it? When it was like we were spanking them and they didn't like it, so they kind of took away our allocation. And it seems like the smaller teams, no disrespect, smaller teams, but you are smaller in comparison to Celtic and Rangers. They've kind of followed suit, but it's a huge own goal for them because obviously it reduces their revenue. It takes away from the spectacle. Now, I understand on one side, you don't want your own ground overrun with opposing fans. You want to try and make it as intimidating and have the sort of advantage to yourselves. But you've got to have a happy balance, haven't you? And it's they're not filling these seats. Why not sort of reduce the prices dramatically and get lots of children in? For sort of future proof for generations and for generations to come. I was reading about, when we were younger, I used to live in the northeast, and the school used to get tickets for Sunderland in Newcastle before they were sort of well supported. So we used to go and watch them. Read an interview with Liam Gallagher. It was like why he got into Man City, and he said that it was a similar thing. His PE teacher, used to get free tickets for Main Road,
That's
how him and his mates. That's how his mates got into going to Man City, and I'm sure that's the same across the board. So they're taking the eye off the ball, and I shared that article from I think it was the Daily Mail with the group chat earlier on about the protests in English football at the moment. where fans are, I think, is it £66 now for a basic ticket for Man United, and that's with them taking away concessions. So there's no old age pensioner discount and no junior discount. So £66 for a ticket. It's absolutely ludicrous, and it's going to. That is the reason that football will eat itself. It's becoming too greedy. So there's a huge chasm of people that are not going to be going to football. A huge chasm of children that will go and watch lower league teams or somewhere they can afford to watch football. And that gap will have to be filled in the future. But it's gone, So they're not looking after themselves, and to a smaller scale, we're doing that in Scotland as well. We haven't sold our soul. We haven't got all the riches of Sky. We still have that kind of. There's a romantic element still to our game, I think. And reading that there's a lot of sort of talk about because Celtic are sort of our advantage is huge financially compared to lots of other teams like the Kilmarnocks of the league. It's not for us to sort of come down to their level because we're generating, we're well managed, we're generating lots of money. It's for these teams to come up to us as best they can, and
absolutely
they can't do it alone. They can't do it alone, But you'd think Sky, Sky have got the model down in England. I've said this before. On a smaller scale, why not put more money into Scottish football and bring the other teams up so it's more competitive and you've got another desirable watch, on these shores.
Big thing for me and is we've undersold the game for so long in terms of broadcast and sponsorship that it's going to take probably a team of people to come in and put that right at this moment in time. I don't think we have the forward-thinking individuals within the SFA. I was talking to you just before we went live, Quinny, about that. Because you meet certain people and you think to yourself, wow, they're far too creative to work in Scottish football. They've got far too many good forward-thinking ideas to actually survive. And we can't be complacent. Celtic can't be complacent. You've always got to have the next wave of a fan base coming through. Some of the things you were saying, Ian, I totally believe in the old school approach of getting into schools early, because there's a whole generation now of kids who are following the box office soccer, not just in English football. You see Barcelona strips, you see Inter Miami strips. What an amazing marketing ploy, not only to get the talent of Messi to your football club to win games, but as a worldwide kind of, globally recognisable figure. Messi has created Inter Miami fans in Scotland. Quinny, that's incredible, right? And that's how these teams target a new fan base. They do it also with online influencers. You see it all the time. Celtic are miles behind the curve when it comes to things like that. We definitely need to look after the fans that we've got, and we need to always look to the next wave of fans, because obviously people hand down the baton. Quinny, I don't know about you, but my upbringing, Celtic were omnipresent. Your dad's going to your games, your cousin, your older cousins, your uncles, they're all going to everybody supports Celtic. So you're born into it. I know that sounds cliched, but you are. You can't remember a time when Celtic weren't part of your life. But there's other distractions now, and there's other big brands who know how to tap into Fortnite and YouTube and all this kind of stuff, whereby kids know all about Man City and Haaland before, a lot of the time their local Scottish football club as well, Quinny. And I do think we're kind of behind the curve on that in terms of influencing a new market of football fans. But see that thing with refusing to give Celtic fans tickets? I don't understand it when the seats are empty. I've not seen a good business plan to suggest that is the way forward, because I know St Mirren talk about building, and so did Burrows when he was at Motherwell, building the trust and the engagement with their own fan base moving forward, and getting them to move from various stands, etc., isn't the way forward. And a lot of their home fans don't like to come watch games against Celtic or Rangers. Obviously, we're getting lumped in with the other club constantly. But Quinny, I do see it as short-sighted. What is the update with the situation at Dumbarton? Because I know that you're working behind the scenes on that.
Well, there is no real update at the moment, as you say, with the police investigation that's going on. There's no kind of further forward word as at the moment, so it's still all kind of background preparation for me in terms of all that kind of stuff. So no actual update or whatever at this point. But on the kind of the ticket sales thing and all the rest of it, like, I always think when I hear this that if the club's fans are that upset about it, then why are they not buying the tickets to prevent it? And I think, like, selling the tickets to Celtic fans, that doesn't motivate them to, well, if you don't buy them, somebody will, because it's, again, like, they need to survive. If you've got a stadium of, I don't know all the capacities off the top of my head for the likes of Tynecastle and Easter Road and whatever, but there's a fair few thousand seats in every one of those stadiums, and every time somebody sits down in it, the club is better off for it. So, you know, like, it's who are they satisfying? They're satisfying people who aren't turning up. If they're not turning up, then why do you why bow to them in that regard? And it's funny, you were saying a story on here the other day about hitting the roundabout with your car and all the rest of it. And
a couple of times.
yeah. And like Scotland, I've got this kind of joke with one of my pals, but like Scotland is like the land of the rule, you know, like where like if somebody said like the SFA or, you know, like you hit the curb, so it's a crime scene and all that kind of stuff, you know, like if that's the rule, that's the rule, you know, and common sense kind of goes out the window, or forward thinking can be forgotten quite quickly because that's the rule, you know, and that's what we're going to do kind of thing. So let's say if those people aren't turning up, why are you bowing down to them? You know, it's your stadium. If you want to make money, sell the tickets, you know, that should really be where it starts and ends. And if they really care that much, then the Aberdeen fans, the Hearts fans, the Hibs fans, internet's a beautiful thing. I'm sure a bunch of them can get together really quickly in a Facebook group or something and say, let's get tickets in section 5 or, you know, bloody whatever, and let's go for it. Because like there's no real excuse, you know, for the most part. Talking about the Man United season tickets, Ian, like, or the match day tickets. I know it's not mad cheap, but it's not that expensive to go to Hearts games, Partick Thistle games, St Mirren games, or whatever. You know, it's not exorbitant at all. So it's it's maddening, I would say.
And it's so like shallow of thought. I mean, the club closest to where I live right now, and therefore my default local club, if you like, is Dunfermline Athletic. Now, they were in administration in 2012. They have never fully recovered. They've never got back into the top division. And they've got a cracking stadium at East End Park, absolutely brilliant stadium. You know, the infrastructure there, you're looking at that thinking this should be a Premier League club. But what it takes to have what Ian suggested there is a liaison officer who would liaise constantly with the local schools and football clubs and various other clubs and organisations within the area to get your next generation in. And they would rather shut the stand than do that, because that would involve actually giving somebody a wage to liaise with all these different organisations. And it can go even further than that. You could go into minority groups within your community if you really want to be a community club and get people from minority groups to come and feel involved within your community club. You could do things like that. You could get unemployed people into games for nothing as well within the area, so that allows them to feel part of something and be part of a community, and there's the whole social aspect of it. So there's loads that can be done. But a lot of the time it comes down to, you know, short-mindedness when it comes to, but that would cost a wage. But that wage could come back, you know, tenfold, 1,000-fold in the years to come. We are talking, of course, about Celtic versus Aberdeen. Aberdeen have a 100% record up at Pittodrie. How do you see it going? Well, we've got Gordon Coney coming in afternoon Acsom. It's good times when our biggest dilemma tomorrow is not the opposition, but what starting 11 do we go with? And there's no wrong answers. If we have quality throughout the squad, we do. I get the feeling, Ian, that Brendan Rodgers is the type of guy, he likes no wastage. He likes no flab, does he? And when he's looking at the squad, he's already trimmed it. When you're looking at the squad and the amount of players that weren't really getting games and on the fringes. But I do still think there are a few. There are a few players on the fringes. And one guy that keeps coming up in terms of transfer rumours, etc., for January is Lewis Palmer. Now, I think there's been a perseverance on the part of Brendan Rodgers with the two wingers, the backup wingers, Palmer and Yang. It looks likely that Palmer's on his way out. And it's interesting because this time last season, he was doing well. He was performing well, good figures, and he was showing a bit. This season, he's barely played. He's been out the squad for a few weeks. If you're able to do a turn on someone like Lewis Palmer or Yang, or even Nawrocki, who hasn't featured, or Odin Holm, and bring in two, you know, move out 4, bring in 2. Do you think that's something that Brendan will be looking at come the summer, the January transfer window, rather?
Yeah, I think so. We've mentioned this again on a pod, haven't we, before? And it's Brendan's showing he's got a ruthless side, and I think you have to be ruthless when it comes to situations like this, you know. And I think Palmer falls in that category. Nawrocki as well is definitely one. It's a shame because I kind of thought he might come good, but he's not really getting the chance. I think we've got to be ruthless with Stephen Welsh. I don't think Stephen Welsh cuts the mustard for me, really. I don't think he's got a heart and desire that a Celtic player needs. I've given my sort of views on that in the past as well. But these fringe players, you can get some money for them, get them away, and add quality. We've got that sort of quality now in sort of the central half positions, with the sort of 3 rotations. And that we need someone to augment that. I don't think we've got a stronger right side of strength half to come in to sort of replace. So little things like that. The only other thing, saving grace, I think I can see for Palmer is if he's tried centrally at some point. But again, where is he getting the team? We're doing so well. You've got to be flying to actually get a chance in this team. So in answer to the question, I think get rid of some of these fringe guys and then go out and try and get a couple more of quality.
The big thing, right? And there are so many people out there, Quinny, who know a hell of a lot more about football than I do, right? And sometimes they use that when you're asking questions. It's like, well, you don't really know about recruitment, or you don't know about scouting or training or whatever it might be. But you look at a player like Nawrocki, he's played 9 minutes of football. We're in December. It's not working. Regardless of what anybody tells you, you're looking at him thinking he's 23. There might be a sell-on value of sorts. We're going to lose some money on him because we paid quite expensive for me, £4.3 million for Mike Nawrocki. So 9 minutes of football, he's not going to play for Brendan Rodgers. You've got to move him on. When it comes to Palmer, I'm just going to be very simplistic here with my approach to a Celtic winger. You've got to have pace and power. You've got to have that. Now, again, sorry, guys and girls, I'm going to mention John Collins here because the subject of Paddy Roberts was brought up. And you'll remember that Paddy Roberts first came to Celtic under Ronnie Dyler and John Collins. And to me, I'm looking at him, he was an exciting player, Quinny. He was a tricky player. He got in amongst the goals. Yeah, you're looking at him thinking, and then for quite a few seasons after that, it was always, well, Paddy Roberts signed at every transfer window. And John Collins said, well, actually, he had to develop his pace and his power. If he really wanted to be a proper Celtic player or a Premier League player in England, that's what he had to do. He had all the attributes in terms of technical ability, but that's the two things he had to do, and he didn't. He says, and there's ways you can work on that. You could have improved that, but he didn't. And he says he's probably found his level now, Championship in England. I'm looking at Palmer. He doesn't have the pace and power, does he? He really doesn't. I think Yang's probably got the pace. Not sure he's got the power. And then you're looking at the likes of Kuhn, who for the size of him, and Maeda for the size of him, pace and power, yeah, they do have it. So I think the Celtic career of Palmer and Nawrocki will come to a close sooner rather than later. It's nothing personal. Often as football fans, we just treat them like commodities. Quinny, yourself, get rid of this one, get rid of that one. But when they're not playing and they're not contributing, it's time to move them on. It's the old Haksabanovic thing that Ian said. We used to go on about Haksabanovic. Maybe he's a number 10, where we don't have the luxury to play him there. And it's a wee bit like that with Palmer. What's your take on the likes of the fringe players, Odin Holm, Nawrocki, even Welsh, Palmer? Did we move them on, if possible?
I think so. I think you're definitely looking for the silver lining to all the mad business we did, where we're bringing in 10 players for £3 each, is at least that some of them can be assets. Like Bernabe comes into this equation as well. If you're thinking about stuffing the coffers up for January, if you get a few bob for him, if Palmer goes to MLS, I think that's a pretty good move for him as well. MLS don't really pay mad fees, but at least if we could get that to wash its face, that would be fine. Lagerbielke has been on loan in Holland, and what I wanted to just double check is that he hadn't made an appearance for us already this season, because you can't appear for 3 teams in a season. But I'm quite certain after he'd been there for a month or two, I seen a report that another club was looking to take him in January that would look to play him more. It might have been Heerenveen. And again, Holland's quite a small place for as much as it's like a decent population and all the rest of it. So I don't really know what the inner workings of that are, but I could see Lagerbielke maybe getting another little kind of turnaround move to someone else, whether it's another loan with an option or something. But let's say the silver lining to bringing in Yangs and Kwons and Tilios and Lagerbielkes and the Rockies is that they should, at the very worst, be these players that you can loan out and try and turn a quid on or two. Like if they don't make it at you, like, yeah, sure, you can cut your nose off with it and throw the baby out with the bathwater and sell them at a loss to somebody, the first person that picks up the phone to you. But if you can like loan them out, and if they are good players, like the Barkas thing was really frustrating because he did well in Holland, people should have been trying to buy him, but felt like there's some nonsense with agents and controlling maybe what the interest was and what people would pay and all the rest of it or whatever, I don't know. But so yeah, I think like Nawrocki, I would be happy just to loan him anywhere, anywhere that'll play him. Lagerby, okay, if he's playing a little bit for Twente, not much, but see, I'm pretty sure I read something that he might get another change of club or something in Holland and get more minutes. Same with Odenholm. Palma, I'd be quite happy to sell, obviously, if you can just wash your face on that deal, like I mentioned, because we need to buy as well, and some of those guys that aren't quite cooked yet, where somebody will pay you a couple of quid for them, just keep loaning them out until someone phones up. That's kind of what I would do with it, because if you're losing money on them, you're losing money on them anyway. Why not get another club to maybe take some of that off you?
Yeah.
And then you're crossing your fingers that it could come good.
Yeah. And then you're tweaking that and you're tightening up that squad, and that 15, 16 players that you can trust become 17 or 18, and you're getting stronger every single time you're going into these big fixtures in the Champions League. Ian, there's been a wee bit of talk. We're football fans, we're allowed to dream. People are talking about the invincible season, how we're actually slightly better this campaign. And then, I don't know if it's generally in football, but there's always a group of Celtic fans saying, oh, come on, don't count your chickens. Don't even mention the Invincibles, etc. But I think after tomorrow's game, because it's at Pittodrie, because they've done so well at home, and I know that they've dropped a few points in recent times, we go up there and we win that. You've then got one eye on a game against Zagreb. You've got another eye on a game against the Rangers in the League Cup final. And the season starts to kind of pan out in front of you. And then Rodgers said it himself last season, this is when Celtic come alive. There's a real togetherness about this team, Ian, isn't there? A real togetherness, because I know in the first tenure under Brendan Rodgers, it didn't end well. There were fractured relationships between certain players. I'm thinking Dembele here, etc. But there really seems to be a togetherness with this Brendan Rodgers side, much more so this season than last as well. And that's key. I'm hearing that Zagreb have had a few issues. Players are getting suspended coming into this game, etc. That's going to be key and pivotal for me, going and trying to get a result tomorrow night and in Europe as well, Ian.
Yeah, and it's a hard act, to sort of keep a largest squad happy, but he seems to be doing that. And it's a large part of recruitment is signing. You can sign the talent, but it has to be married with the attitude. And I think that's I did that blog a while ago about kind of Brendan Rodgers and the kind of his sensibilities and his ethos, and it's he's from working class, hard working background, and I think hard work is a very, very high point for him, and he demands that. So if you're a hard worker, you've got something about you, you have a steeliness about you, you have an ethic, so you tend to think if you've got an ethic like that, then you're of good character. Mm-hmm. I'm surmising that, but I think they all sort of go hand in hand and dovetail together. So I think that's a large part of the togetherness. Sorry. So that's I think we'll just keep building that. He'll keep identifying these players that will fit in with the team and with the squad. I don't think he'll go for a Faustino Asprilla or a kind of a Messi or someone like that. Or some kind of genius maverick that's going to upset the balance of the dressing room. I think that will just keep adding the right type of guy.
Ashby is a great example of that. But in terms of Celtic, Quinny, as much as, let's put the politics to one side for a moment, as much as we enjoyed watching Di Canio as a Celtic player, when you start speaking to people who were part of that team, a lot of them actually say that we were a wee bit more fractured as a team the season that Di Canio was there. So we go through the campaign the previous season when we signed Cadet and the registration's late, etc., etc. We go through the entire campaign and lose one league game. And then it looks as though we're strengthening the side again, and we bring in Stubbsy, big money buy, we bring in Di Canio. You're thinking, wow, we're really going to go for it this time round. And we weren't as good that season. We weren't as together that season as we were in the previous one. And a big part of that, and I'm not blaming Di Canio, but you talk to his teammates, and Paolo was about Paolo, Quinny. As great as he was to watch, he was about himself. And that's the type of player that can create problems. And, then you've got wee cliques within a dressing room. I think with a tighter group of players, it's going to be much easier to manage. And I think that if there are any of the guys, they're already out the building, or most of them are already out the building. There might be one or two stragglers, and I think it's important to move them on as well. I do agree with Ian. Quinny, what's your take on it when it comes to Brendan? And it's a lot about the personality of the individual, the mentality of that, to build that culture within the dressing room.
I think, again, it's something that we've all kind of said about different parts of the squad already, but There's clearly, like, you know, McKibben captained his club before he came. Bernardo's got captain experience. There is like that kind of level of player, you know, personality, if you like, that's going throughout the team. And I do think like the current kind of generation of squad we've had, like O'Reilly was a bit of the kind of poster child for this kind of thing, where they're quite like modern footballers nowadays. Like a lot of them have kind of got past, or the generations have kind of went past a bit of the nonsense of like social media and all that kind of stuff. And the current generation of like young kids that are, you know, young players that are kind of coming through want to be like Ronaldo, in the sense of like they want to play till they're 40 if they're capable. They're all about being best health and condition they can be, being the best person they can be, and, you know, keeping themselves true to the profession and all the rest of it. And yeah, so I think like we've got a really good squad in terms of, you know, that kind of player idea already. And if anyone does come in that doesn't quite fit that, like Collins was saying that about Kazim Richards, where like, you know, you can just tell with somebody they're not going to fit in, and if they don't fit in, it doesn't take long to work it out, and then, you know, you move yourself on at the next opportunity you can. So I think like, yeah, you'll continue to see that when people come in, if they don't match that personality that the squad has. You know, you were saying there's something similar about Ralston in terms of how he brings the Celtic personality into the squad.
Yeah.
But there's also the kind of, you know, just the general attitude of the squad, how it has to be day to day, player by player. And that's just as important at this level of the game than anything.
You know, Kazim Richards, I actually think he would be a very interesting guest for This Is Acsom. I sometimes like, you know,
He'll have stories.
He will. The more obscure footballers that have passed through Celtic Park, I sometimes think I wouldn't mind finding out from them. I mean, I would like to speak to Martin Hayes. Martin Hayes was an enigma when he came to Celtic. You know, a guy that scored goals for Arsenal. And the story goes that George Graham wanted him off the books. And I think Celtic went in with an initial bid of 250k, and Arsenal wanted 300 grand. And so George Graham asked for a wee bit more, and Billy McNeil offered 650. And he obviously bit our hand off for it. And hey, you know, but where did it all go wrong? And I think a big part of that, I mean, Martin Hayes has become something of a joke figure at Celtic. He was scoring goals for an Arsenal team that had guys like Alan Smith in it. Ian, you'll remember that great Arsenal team. Yeah. You know, he came through with the likes of Paul Merson and all that. So these guys, and by the way, Mike Nawrocki's not a bad player, and Haksabanovic wasn't a bad player, and Barkas isn't a bad goalie. But it takes a certain type of player and personality to make it at Celtic, and I think that's absolutely key. But see, when I'm thinking about big pivotal teams in my Celtic supporting life, what came before, everybody knows about the Lions, but look at the team and look at the leadership within that side. You could have half a dozen captains. I mean, Big Billy's the best captain of all time. Bertie Auld could have been your captain. Bobby Murdoch could have been your captain. Tommy Gemmell. You know, so many captains within the one team. And then the first team I watched was the Centenary side. Right, you had Roy Aitken was the captain, but you also had Pat Bonner, Tommy Burns. You know, and you had a few of the newer guys coming in who had loads of bags of experience. Martin O'Neill's team, Paul Lambert, Jackie McNamara, Neil Lent, they were all captains for me. Every one of them. Tom Boyd, he was a captain. And I think Petrov, exactly. And I think this time round, and whether it's by design or not, or it's just the character of the players, Ian, Brendan Rodgers has got a number of what I would see as leaders, stroke captains within that dressing room. And, you know, even when it was Schmeichel, I think, that pulled the guys together for an impromptu huddle, you've got Johnston, who's a captain, 100% a captain and a leader. You've got your centre-halves who look like leaders. You've got all your midfielders that you mentioned, Quinny, all leaders. I think that's absolutely massive because although Callum McGregor has got an incredible level of performance and an incredible standard, Ian, even when he's a wee bit off it, or even if he's not in the team at some point this season, I'm confident that we've got enough leadership within that core group that will see us through. Do you think Brendan tries to identify that in a player when he's bringing them to the football club, Ian, or do you think that's just kind of happened by a wee bit of luck? Because for me, there's 4 or 5 proper leaders in this team at the moment.
No, that's by design. You know, I think the great size that you've mentioned before, you know, and I think you're signing players. When you say sort of leadership, it's, you know, you might be a leader with not a lot of experience. I think that's very, very rare. You find that the leadership comes through experience. You know, getting miles in the tank and knowing your job. You know, and being comfortable in your own skin enough to sort of know your job and to be able to sort of, you know, lead by example, or you know, bring people up verbally on the pitch. You know, and talk players through games and things like that. So it's all part of the package with the recruitment. I think, you know, it's and it's an essential part of modern recruitment. You know, some of the players that sort of in the bygone days, some managers always had an eye for a player, you know, and it's like, I think that was Billy McNeil, I think when he was at Celtic, after he went down to England, you know, he got McCarthy, didn't he, and a few players that he knew from down in England, you know, oh my goodness me, the winger, Chris Morris, it's not winger, sorry, the right back, Chris Morris, you know, players like that, they'd identified when he's down in England.
Yeah.
You're understanding, you've played against them, played with them or played against them, you know, so you'll see them and you'll check them out and you'll keep an eye on them, maybe, you know. Obviously recruitment has become this big behemoth now, compared to those days. But I think, yeah, it's in answer to the question again, it's certainly by design. But I don't think Brendan Rodgers doesn't do anything by sort of leave anything to chance. I think he's a man that leaves no stone unturned.
Chris Morris was a tremendous buy. Plucked him out of Sheffield Wednesday reserves. But as you say, he had played against either Villa or Man City when Billy McNeil was down there. And he was a winger, Ian, believe it or not. He was playing on the right wing for Sheffield Wednesday reserves. And obviously we've adapted him into a right back. And he was the only ever present that season in the double winning season. Paddy Lavery, always great to see you popping in. You've updated your avatar. I'm not quite sure what that is.
Belter.
Looking like Palmer could be off ski in January. Yes, it does. You just kind of wish him well, and he moves on, and he joins a whole host of players like the aforementioned Haksabanovic, who just, you know, he's passing through Celtic Park. Paul McLean, a good win, and Celtic can begin the journey out of sight. Trouble with that though is second place becomes a point of excitement apart from the games against Sevco. Kevin Mullen. Afternoon Acsom, buzzing for the game tomorrow. Think we get early goal. Could put a few goals past the Dons tomorrow night. Loving the way the goals are spread about the team. And interestingly, Brendan Rodgers spoke about the fact that he likes that within his side. He just mentioned that recently. But I remember him talking about it first time round as well. Charitable work, Quinny. What about the levels that our fan base goes to? So the foundation have recently had their Girls for Good event, raising lots of cash for that. The team are at the Children's Hospital in Glasgow. The Green Brigade are pulling in over 20 grand in cash donations plus 7 van fills of food for the underprivileged at this time of year. It's humbling when you read these stories, Quinny. And I don't know, I know that a lot of football clubs do it and a lot of fan bases do it, and tip my hat to every one of them. But Celtic, man, just absolutely brilliant at this time of year and all year round, doing what we can for those less privileged than us.
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of like the identity of Celtic because, like you say, everyone kind of does it now, and it feels like for some people it's more PR than goodwill kind of thing, you know. But Celtic has been doing this, and even through the foundation, fan groups, and everything else for, you know, as long as, you know, being founded essentially, you know. So it's and again it kind of goes back into again some of the football chat, I suppose. But like the club really does have its own identity, it really does have its own, you know, ethos and kind of belief system, I suppose, in that way. And it never ceases to amaze you, some of the stuff that happens. And it's the variety of things as well. It's not just like, you know, yeah, not to pick one category, but it's across like everything, you know, from poverty to, you know, supporting people in, you know, dangerous places, and even in people in like Thailand and, you know, all these other kind of far-flung reaches of the globe, because the fan base is everywhere. It's a global community, the Celtic fan base.
Yeah, and all year round, you know, opening up the stadium to allow people a hot meal at night time, I think 3 or 4 times a week. It's phenomenal. It really is phenomenal. And what we're trying to do a wee bit as well, Ian, and we've had a Sell the Jerseys initiative that's been ongoing. And it's a whole process that's now underway. So basically, originally we just said, you know, your old Celtic jerseys, and sometimes you give them to charities and they go overseas, etc. Send them to us, give them to us, we'll meet you up in Glasgow. We're in there filming at least once a week, and basically the original batch came in. I think we got like, I don't know, 60 or 80 jerseys of all shapes and sizes and descriptions, and some of them were already signed actually, and other ones were match worn. And because we're coming into contact with Excels, I'm just taking a bundle of about 10 at a time and getting them signed, and then once we've got about 20 signatures, they go into a different pile. They have to be framed, and then once we've got a big event coming up, as we did a couple of months ago with wee Jamie, we get as many of them framed as we can, and they go into auctions and raffles, and we raise cash. So from that wee jersey sitting in your cupboard to us going around all the events and getting them signed, to them getting framed up and the framer gives us a brilliant deal on the frames. And we can raise some much needed funds for our chosen charity, which is Wee Jamie Tierney, who will continue to support for as long as we have to. So I had a wee dig through the jerseys, and being a jersey pervert, it's always great fun to go through the jerseys. We've got loads at the moment. We're working on about 20 that have already got signatures. If you want to get involved and chuck us a few jerseys here or there, we'll take them off your hands. It might take 6-12 months before they're all signed up and framed, etc. But as I say, we're now in that groove, and we've got the first batch all framed up and they've been auctioned off. The next ones are just about ready to go. And we're going to have a big charity ball in 2025. So about 20 of these will be framed up by that point. Get in touch in the usual way. You can go through the DMs. You can join us on social media channels, or you can email me at pauldykes@gmail.com. Or indeed, come along to one of the events. Come along to one of our events and you can hand them. And then we've got a half-price Christmas offer on the remainder. I think we've got about a third left. We've sold 2/3 of the centenary tickets. If you want to come along, promo code is Acsom1888. Why not come along and bring a pal? 2 for 1, half price. So thanks every single one of you. I know you were a jersey aficionado yourself back in the day, Ian. And we asked John Collins. He was looking through the Celtic jersey book and he was pinpointing all the yellow jerseys. He says, I remember Celtic playing in yellow away kits. I just said yellow. That's 5 for yellow for anyone. I don't know how that pops up on the subtitles. But yes, give us your jerseys and we'll make them worth a wee bit more, and we'll get them auctioned for a good cause. Before you go, guys, I'm going to be looking for a prediction for tomorrow night. Kevin Graham yesterday says predictions are for fools, but he gave me one anyway. Ian Conroy, prediction for tomorrow.
2-1 Celtic.
2-1 Celtic, nice and tight up at Pittodrie. What about yourself, Quinny?
I went with 3-1 in the live chat listening to you yesterday, but I didn't really know about the Meathoff situation. I think we'll beat them 4-0.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that. And again, we keep talking about putting down markers. That would be another one tomorrow night. Thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved. It's always a pleasure to talk for an hour. We might even extend it at some point in 2025. Can you take more than an hour of Celtic chat every day? Probably. So thank you all for getting involved. And thank you once again to Quinny and Ian Conroy for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.